Okay, so our last panel for the day looks at the present and future of offshore energy, how we are reducing and preparing for potential risks of development, and promoting a culture of safety in the search for the next boom of American energy. To lead the discussion and to introduce the panelists whom we have is Monica Trauzzi. And if Monica looks familiar, it's because many of you watch her and can watch her on a daily basis on E&E TV's daily interview program, On Point. And in that role, Monica has produced and moderated more than 1,000 on-camera interviews. So I'm hoping that Monica could tell me how we can improve the panels that we have here at CHOW. But in the meantime, I'll turn it over to Monica to lead the next discussion. Monica?
Thank you very much. Thank you to the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation as well for the invitation to participate today. So, the topic. As America faces this energy transformation and transition, we have a distinguished group of panelists convened today to explore the future of ocean energy and the key challenges that exist to maintaining responsible and sustainable practices. And I anticipate that we will get into a very lively and engaging discussion, and we will have an opportunity for the audience members as well to offer up questions later on in our panel, and I look forward to that. So without further ado, our first panelist is Dr. Walter Cruickshank, the Acting Director of the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And just a few areas that Dr. Cruickshank is responsible for: leasing, plan administration, environmental studies, NEPA analysis, resource evaluation, economic analysis, and the renewable energy program. Is there anything you don't do? Next, we have Brian Salerno, Director of the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, and he is responsible for promoting safety, protecting the environment, and conserving resources through the vigorous regulatory oversight and enforcement of offshore operations of the U.S. Outer Continental Shelf. Charlie Williams is next. Charlie is the Executive Director of the Center for Offshore Safety. Previously, Charlie retired from Shell Oil as Chief Scientist of Well Engineering after a 40-year career, and he also was Vice President of Global R&D at Shell. And finally, Aileen Kenny joins the panel. Aileen is Vice President of Permitting and Environmental Affairs at Deepwater Wind, which is based in Providence, Rhode Island, and she oversees environmental surveys and permitting of Deepwater Wind's portfolio, which includes projects that are off the coast of New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. So the way we'll work this is that each panelist will have a couple of minutes to give some introductory remarks, and then we're going to jump right into a discussion, some Q&A, and hopefully we'll have some good questions from the audience as well. So first up, Dr. Cruickshank.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Jason, and to all of you for spending the afternoon with us here. At Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, as you heard, our responsibility is to be the resource manager for energy and minerals on the Outer Continental Shelf. And that involves really trying to find the appropriate balance between developing those resources and protecting the marine, coastal, and human environments. Since our focus is on the future, I really want to start by saying we shouldn't ignore the present. That right now, the Outer Continental Shelf accounts for about 20% of the oil produced in this country, and the volumes are expected to go up over the next few years as projects in the Deepwater Gulf of Mexico come on stream. It's important to note that part of the Gulf of Mexico is one of the primary investment targets for the oil and gas industry in the globe. So as we look at the future, we have to remember what we're doing presently is a large part of that future. That said, as we consider other areas and look at other areas, our goal is to make sure that we get the best information we can possibly get to aid in our decision making. That includes getting a better understanding of the energy and mineral resources that are out there, where they are and how much there might be, improving on our scientific understanding of the ecosystems and the species that are out there on the Outer Continental Shelf. We have a very robust environmental studies program funding a lot of research to fill in gaps in knowledge, and also to have a better understanding of the other uses of the ocean, from subsistence hunting through military testing and training, to understand what those conflicts are and how we might be able to manage them. And all of this dialogue is going to be front and center in the near future, as we will be, before too long, getting underway with our public planning process for our next 5-year program, where these sorts of issues will be what we really want to engage all of you and the public in with respect to a good dialogue on where we should be going in the future. Turning real quickly to renewable energy, there we are really in a very dynamic time. The program started just a few years ago and was focused on trying to use that same sort of approach to identify areas that may be suitable for wind energy, areas that had that potential resource, but where we could manage the conflicts with environmental and other users. But now, as you heard Secretary Jewell say, we've issued 5 commercial leases. We're going to have 3 more lease sales coming up in the coming year. And so we're entering that phase now where there are leases in private hands. And so we're now looking at working with them in order to figure out how we take those next steps to assess those sites and to figure out how we can move forward with the design and construction of projects. So it's a very exciting time out on the Outer Continental Shelf. A lot of things that are going on, a lot of potential, but a lot of work to do to see how much of that potential will come to fruition.
Dr. Salerno?
Well, I'm not a doctor. That's his title. But thank you. That was a promotion.
Director Salerno.
Right. But actually, thank you for inviting me to participate in this panel. I always love appearing with my friend Walter here and Charlie and Eileen. I just met, but I think we're in for a very good discussion. You know, the topic is very timely for us. You know, the energy evolution is something that we talk about internally within the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, because we are involved in regulating an industry which is very forward-leaning, very dynamic, and very innovative. And that poses a very significant challenge for us as a regulator. We are seeing capabilities that are currently in use that were almost undreamt of, you know, a generation ago. And we anticipate that technological advances will continue. So the challenge for us is how do we keep pace with that? You know, it is hugely challenging. Industry sets a very aggressive pace. They are the initiators of this new technology. So as a regulator, we need to keep up with it. One of the ways we do that, I think, is to engage constructively with the industry. And we can talk a little bit more about that in the Q&A session. We obviously have regulations that we maintain, but we also look at forums to come together, and very recently established an Offshore Energy Safety Institute at the University of Texas to do just that, to bring industry, academia, and the government together to look at what is new, what is emerging, and how we can best fulfill our public responsibilities to make sure that drilling or production is safe and clean, because that is our mandate. We talk a lot about safety culture and the human element, because as wonderful as all this technology is, it's run by people. People have to interpret information and data, they have to operate the systems, and all of that requires training and processes that are very well thought out. The human element is critical, and that is why within our Bureau we actually issued regulations following the Deepwater Horizon incident on safety and environmental management, SEMS. This is an evolving process. I'm sure Charlie will talk a lot about that as well. It is an area where we engage with the industry in a very robust and very meaningful way. And also we look at risk, you know, because that really kind of ties everything together. It's understanding the barriers to unwanted events and making sure that they're maintained. It's making sure that companies actually have good systems in place that start at the corporate boardroom level, you know, establishing the right parameters, the right processes, the right safety expectations, and then reinforcing them all the way down to the newest employee on the drill floor. We look at that very closely. I think that's probably our next step in refining safety culture. We've had a forum on that very recently. And it also informs the way we as regulators go about interacting with the industry as well. We're looking at things like risk-based inspections. If we can identify high-risk areas, that's where we want to put the preponderance of our regulatory effort. So all of those things work together. It's technology, the human element, risk, all form part of the safety culture. That's our mandate within BSEE. And quite honestly, that's the expectation the public has, that there is a very robust safety culture offshore, because nobody wants to see the type of environmental damage that is possible, and we all know can happen if we're not paying attention. So I'll end there, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Charlie?
Thank you. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity. And I'm Executive Director, Center for Offshore Safety. We're an industry association, and we're unique, I think, as an industry association because we're entirely focused on safety and environmental management systems. So we were created post-Horizon, post-Macondo to do that focus. And so we don't, neglect the traditional things that people thought about safety, which was protecting people, and, hard hats and steel-toed shoes and holding the handrails and all that. But we really wanted to change the focus in the industry and build tools to help the industry focus on SIMS, which is really about leadership. It's about good operating practices and standards. It's about skills and knowledge of the people that do the work. And it's about building systems that business systems and processes that continually deliver safety through the business systems and the processes on a continuous basis. So that's our work. And SIMS, in running good SIM systems, is what delivers the safety culture that we all want in the industry. And the other big thing that we focused on is really measurement and using performance-based systems, and then measuring those systems to assure that you're achieving what you want, and that these systems are really in place and they're effective. And this was part of an overall industry response post-Horizon and post-Macondo. The response was the industry came together and looked at what are the things that they need to be enhanced, improved, and made more effective. One of these was processes like SIMS and the Center for Offshore Safety, which of course is I think the most important one, and certainly the most important one to me. But there were other processes that are extremely important as well, as looking at how you manage contractors and subcontractors and build business systems to do that well. There was a task group that worked on spill cleanup response, and the spill cleanup resources in the Gulf are more than twice as much as they used to be. There was a group that worked on the industry standards and how, what industry standards need to be changed and enhanced and improved and made more effective. And then there was a group that worked on subsea containment, and probably many of you, have heard about Marine Well Containment Company and the Helix company that have the equipment on the ready now to do subsea intervention on subsea wells if the need arises again. So the industry, worked together, band together to make all these changes and really make things more effective. But the key was really this focus on business systems and business processes that deliver safety as a key part of your business, and that's what we're doing at COS. And we're of course working collaboratively and closely with the new regulation. So the new regulation around SIMS came out at the same time to do performance-based safety systems. So it works really well together. So that's what we're focused on. Thank you.
Thank you. Aileen?
My name is Aileen Kenny, and I'm with Deepwater Wind. I'm responsible for all of the environmental and permitting at the company. We are a Providence-based developer of offshore wind farms. And we have a number of projects planned on the East Coast and also one recently announced on the West Coast. Our project that's furthest along is called the Block Island Wind Farm Project, and it is located in state waters off the coast of Rhode Island. It's a 30-megawatt project that will deliver offshore wind power to Block Island, and it will also connect Block Island to the mainland grid. Currently, Block Island, which is a beautiful, beautiful island, that has a small population and a small load, it's currently not connected to the mainland grid, so they use diesel generators for their power on the island. And there's a host of issues that go with that. So part of the agreement that we have with the state of Rhode Island for this project is we'll connect Block Island to the mainland grid and lower their power prices and also stabilize their energy source. So we're happy to announce that Block Island recently received the unanimous approval of the Rhode Island Coastal Resources Management Council for the approval to proceed under their permitting jurisdiction. And now we're waiting within the next few weeks to receive our permits from the Army Corps of Engineers and also from BOEM. And with Block Island, we'll be starting construction next summer, and we'll be fully operational in 2016. So we hope to be the first offshore wind project in the United States. And just touching a bit on, what laid the foundation for the success of Block Island. Rhode Island had completed a comprehensive marine spatial planning exercise called the Rhode Island Ocean Special Area Management Plan, or the OSAMP. And that was completed during a period of about 6 years, starting in 2006 or 2007. And it really, it brought a lot of different stakeholders to the table, the tribes, the fishing community, the different environmental NGOs, agencies. Everybody came around the table and looked at the coast of Rhode Island and further out into federal waters and talked about the different marine uses and where folks would like to see, where would be most suitable for future development in the ocean. And so that was something that really helped the permitting of our project move along. And it was eventually NOAA adopted the Rhode Island OSAMP for the federal waters portion off the coast of Rhode Island, which was the first time they had ever done that. So as we think about ocean planning and we think about moving forward in the future of energy, we at Deepwater Wind, we really feel that it's critical to plan properly with the appropriate stakeholders around the table and really listen to one another's needs, and that can lead to successful development, which we hope, we expect Block Island to be. Dr. Cruickshank mentioned that they had issued commercial leases for offshore wind projects. Deepwater Wind was the recipient of the first commercial lease that BOEM issued, and it was for an area called the Rhode Island, Massachusetts Wind Energy Area, which is an area within the Rhode Island OSAMP area that's off the coast of Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And we're excited to announce that we've planned the first phase of our development in the wind energy area. We've proposed a 200 megawatt offshore wind project that we hope to connect into Long Island. And we've submitted a proposal to Long Island Power Authority to connect under an RFP that they have open. So again, this will be something where the marine spatial planning efforts that have gone on will benefit the future development of that area. And it's also an area where we've taken some proactive steps that we're very proud of. We announced recently an agreement with several national NGOs to add additional protections for the North Atlantic right whale when we're conducting noise-producing activities that could result in harassment. We worked with the National Resource Defense Council, Conservation Law Foundation, and the National Wildlife Federation to develop a set of additional protective measures that we will impose on ourselves at additional cost to us. And also we created restrictions, work windows within which we can conduct these noise-producing activities. This was, I believe, the first of its kind agreement. These agreements, this is the second one we've executed with these NGOs. We were happy that on this agreement, it was signed by not only NRDC and CLF, and also NWF, but also Environment America, Oceana, the International Fund for Animal Welfare, and the Sierra Club. So it's, from our development perspective at Deepwater Wind, it's really important that we're working with all of the stakeholders and the fishermen, the tribes, and also the NGOs and other interested parties to really address issues and be proactive about addressing them so that we can proceed and do what our goal is, which is to site and develop offshore wind energy. So just to touch on our other developments, we also have a project that we're planning off the coast of New Jersey with PSEG. It's called Garden State Offshore Energy, and we hope to bid into the auction that BOEM will be holding later this year. And we recently announced a partnership with Principal Power for a floating turbine off the coast of Oregon. So that's an exciting step for us because it represents a different type of foundation technology, which is a floating turbine, which will allow offshore wind turbines in deeper waters. So we're happy to be on this panel, and we appreciate the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation including us. We are users of the ocean, and we take our responsibilities very seriously, and I'm looking forward to some discussion and questions.
Thank you, Aileen. So Dr. Cruickshank, where do the biggest opportunities exist for the agencies to make strides in energy development and continue to strengthen the relationship that you have with industry? Where are the biggest windows still?
Well, I think the opportunities are very large, and we already talked about for both oil and gas and renewable energy. But in terms of where we can work on relationships with industry, I think, as most of my answers, it'll be different depending on which industry we're talking about. For renewable energy, we're really in a phase of mutual education. Anything that we're doing out there on the OCS now is going to be a first for this country, since we haven't seen any of these projects here. So the first projects, the first time any of these companies have worked with the government on permitting, the first time our permitting process has been used. It's never gone from beginning to end yet. So we really have to see how everything works and sit down with the developers and other stakeholders all the way through the process and understand what's working and what isn't in that framework that was developed a few years ago, and make modifications as we go. The oil and gas industry, I think the relationship is mature. It's been there for a long time, and the main thing will be just to continue communicating, talking to them about what issues we see, having them tell us what issues they see, and talk about both the nature of those problems and what possible solutions are. But I don't think there needs to be any real change in that relationship, just a continuation of strong communication.
Aileen, Dr. Cruickshank just mentioned that when it comes to renewable energy development, it's a lot of new stuff, new elements. What are the biggest government roadblocks that you encounter when you work to permit the projects that you work on?
So the Block Island project will be, it's almost permitted, and I've been saying that for a long time, but I really mean it this time. And I think that BOEM has established these state, federal, interagency groups that work in the federal waters, in the wind energy areas, and that's a great first step because it gets the agencies talking. I think that the biggest roadblock is time, and just there's a lot of agencies, there's a lot of regulation, there's a lot that needs to happen. There's right now on Block Island, we're held up by getting things that the coordination issues. Different agencies need certain things to happen before they can act. And really the state, federal, and the federal to federal interagency coordination, as well as the coordination with the different consulting agencies, whether it be other federal agencies consulting or other stakeholders like others providing input, for example, the fishing community, making sure that we really are able to understand upfront what their interest is and work with the agencies to ensure that their concerns are addressed adequately. So later on in the process, when we think that we're pretty close to getting our permits, or we're pretty close to that final decision, that something doesn't come up. So I think that there's been some great first steps, and as Dr. Cruickshank said, it's a first for everybody. So I think one of the benefits of the Block Island project, it's small, and we're all learning to work together. And as the larger developments occur, I think the issues will be more complex, but we'll have, at least for the agencies I've worked with, we'll understand one another a little bit better. And I think that's something that will really assist in moving things along.
Is it challenging to handle all of those different stakeholder interests?
The agencies really do play a very big role in that under the consultation process, and we have to play an active role in it as well. We had early stakeholder outreach with the critical interests, for example, the fishing community in Rhode Island. We had early open meetings with them. They suggested some really creative ideas for mitigation for the project. And tomorrow you'll hear from Chris Brown from the Seafood Harvesters of America. He's one of the Rhode Island fishermen who was very proactive and really led the way in identifying appropriate mitigation. And we were able to come up with things. For example, we're funding the executive director of a Rhode Island-based commercial fisheries group for a period of 4 years as part of our mitigation agreement with them directly. So we were able to come up with that mitigation with the stakeholder groups directly, amongst other things. But it really I think it helped the process move along because the burden was not on the agencies to force us to do anything or to get involved, to intervene. We came up with a plan and they were satisfied with that plan.
I'm curious, from all the panelists, what regions of the country you see as holding the most promise for offshore renewable energy development, if you want to start.
I'll start. I think when I think about that question of promise, there's really several criteria that you're looking for. One is the resource potential itself, and I would argue there, whether it's wind or wave or current energy, there's enormous potential off of every coast. But then you're looking at other things such as how close can you be to the demand centers for electricity? What is the relative price of electricity in that region? What are the state programs that might be supporting renewable energy or not in terms of renewable energy credits, in terms of investment in ocean planning, such as the Rhode Island case, or in building infrastructure to support the industry? And I think where you see all those criteria come together is, to date, has been the North and Mid-Atlantic, where all of those things sort of line up, and that's why you see those leases and those projects moving out first. But the potential is there everywhere if everything lines up.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I'll just say, follow Walter's lead on location, but it's something that we are seeing as an emerging area of interest, from a BSEE standpoint. Once these installations are there and they're operating, there's going to be offshore safety concerns, and that is something that we are working, internally and with other stakeholders to develop what are the appropriate standards, for safety, for offshore safety.
I guess the one thing I'd add following on to that is that, so if you look at the new safety and environmental management regulation, and you look at the safety and environmental management systems, the beauty of this, since it's focused on things like managing change, hazard identification, building barriers against hazards, it's perfectly adaptable and portable to any kind of energy in any kind of place, because it focuses on running and measuring systems that deliver safety. And so even though the detailed regulations on specific technologies are important too, this system focuses on how do you run your business to deliver safety.
So talking about both oil and gas and renewables, NIMBY. How much of an uphill climb does that continue to be, and does there seem to be more of an acceptance from the public for the expansion and development of offshore energy technologies?
I'll start on that one. So I think it's certainly, is key. We talked about it on renewables. The key is communicating. I mean, the customer of the government, and the customer of the industry is the public, and the public are the ones that have to be convinced that this can be done in their best interest and safely. So that's the key. And I think there's been, to me, the industry and everybody's really focused on communicating with the stakeholders and making sure that they really, understand the risk and the benefits and the opportunities and all. But I think to some degree, we need to really focus on how we change the conversation, because people talk about, well, technology or technology challenges, and they think that translates into more risk. And really, the purpose of the new technology should be to reduce the risk. And so if you have a more challenging situation, you want to develop new technologies that manage the risk and make it better. So the focus of the technology is really on that, and not, so going into more ultra deep water, we want to have technologies that meet the challenge and manage the risk. And so the conversation needs, and the director was talking about this, the conversation needs to change over to the people interact with the technology and deliver it, and the business systems interact with the technology and deliver it. So we need to start saying we have to have these good systems, and we have to measure effectiveness of these systems and understand these systems of how people interact with, and when I say people, the workers and the employees deliver this technology in a way that delivers this reduced risk that's built into the technology already.
I think, in terms of the NIMBY aspect of, for specific to offshore wind energy, you'll see that moving forward, a lot of the projects are going to be further out over the horizon. And I think that some of these early projects, like the Block Island project, Block Island serves a specific purpose. So I think that that's a little bit of a different situation. But moving forward, you'll see that they're further out and outside of people's viewshed. I think that the stakeholder groups and the user groups, when you get further out, there's fewer groups, but there's still very important groups like the commercial and recreational fishing groups and the Native American tribes and the Coast Guard and the DOD. So BOEM has done a really good job with creating their wind energy areas to try to solve one level of conflict, but then really the micro siting within the lease areas is something that the leaseholders need to embark on and really take seriously. And I think we'll get, at least at Deepwater, I can say that we've learned a lot on Block Island. We still have a lot to learn, and so we will continue to work with the different groups and engage them early and often and respectfully, and hopefully we can all come to the common goal of doing something that's good for our environment and for our country. And I think that working with offshore renewables, you do get people, people appreciate it. They like the concept in general. So I think that helps a lot when you're trying to site the facilities.
Director Salerno, what progress has been made on making the permitting process for offshore drilling more transparent?
Permitting for offshore has generated a lot of attention internally within BSEE. And the good news is, in the aggregate, there's multiple types of permits. In the aggregate, though, the time it takes to process a permit has been reduced in the last 2 years by a fairly significant amount. I think it was in the 70 plus days 2 years ago. It's now 50 plus days. But we're not done yet. We are currently using a process called eWell to process some permit applications. That will expand in the future to something called ePermit. Will be more comprehensive, provide greater transparency, so you'll be able to see where the permit is in the process. And I think will also allow us to identify any areas where there's waste in the system in terms of cycle time. So we can eliminate where something is sitting idle, eliminate errors up front that would actually help the submitter, prevent or avoid submitting an application that doesn't have critical elements that adds to delays. So the system, I think, will get us to a far better place in terms of processing and transparency, but it is a work in progress.
So what is that end goal in terms of how long it will take a permit?
Well, there's no magic number on how long it will take. My goal is predictability. I would like the industry to be able to know roughly how long a particular permit type will take so that they can build that into their planning. We have a much more robust planning process, or excuse me, a permit review process than was the case, 4 or 5 years ago. But even despite that, we've been able to reduce the amount of time. But I don't think there's a magic number. It's really just all about predictability.
Dr. Cruickshank, in your opening remarks, you talked about what's going to happen over the next 5 years, the 5-year plan. What do you see as the path forward over the next 5 years?
I'm really focusing on a shorter time period in a sense, because if you look 5 years out, you're going to miss a lot over the next year, year and a half. The sorts of things that we'll be doing in the near term include kicking off the process for the next 5-year program for oil and gas leasing. We will shortly be addressing a record of decision regarding geological and geophysical surveys off the mid-South Atlantic. I'm sure that's going to generate a lot of conversation once that decision is made. As we've been talking about, there's more lease sales coming up for renewable energy, more siting decisions, and as Aileen indicated, getting more granular on the existing leases as we start getting plans in for activities. There's some regulations we'll be doing on the BOEM side as well. Jointly with Bessie, we're looking at new Arctic standards. We have jurisdiction over air quality in parts of the Gulf of Mexico and North Slope of Alaska, and we'll be looking at putting a regulatory framework in place for that. We are looking hard at the risks associated with the companies that are operating offshore and the liabilities that they have and how we best protect the taxpayer. I think a lot of people are waiting to see what will happen in the Arctic in terms of the leases that are there, whether there will be drilling and what that drilling finds, which will have a big impact on what the future looks like in the Arctic. So those are all things that will be happening over the next couple of years and will have implications for 5 years out and well beyond.
So on the Arctic specifically, how do you manage the potential excitement that exists around this opportunity of a next boom? How do you make sure that things are not moving too quickly where we sort of get ahead of ourselves?
That one for me?
For anyone on the panel, yeah.
Yeah, how do we manage it? I think very carefully. It has some unique challenges to operate there. I'm probably stating the obvious. The climatic conditions, of course, can be extreme. There's issues regarding ice and ice management and having the right procedures in place when ice becomes a problem. The logistics are extremely challenging. There's not a lot of infrastructure in the northern coast of Alaska. The closest port, for a ship to refuel, that's going to operate in the Bering Sea, a large ship would be Dutch Harbor, about 1,000 miles away. So when you think about what it takes to operate there, the challenges are extraordinary. And in many cases, for example, in 2012, when Shell was operating up there, they actually had to sea base a lot of their capability and provide it afloat. They still had a shoreside footprint, but a lot of it was at sea. Very difficult to do. The challenge really is in the climate and the distances, the logistical challenges, as well as making sure that nothing goes into the ocean. It's a very pristine environment. There are native communities there that rely or that use the ocean as their form of subsistence. They're subsistence hunters. So a lot of effort, and to Shell's credit, they've met with all of those communities, and they understand, they get it, that has to be protected. So there's a lot of care that's put into that, a lot of scrutiny, not only by Bessie and BOEM, but by a full range of federal agencies that have an interest there, as well as state and local stakeholders as well. So
how much pressure do you feel from industry, though, to move things along?
Well, there's a great deal of interest to go up there, and we're certainly working with industry to make sure that they understand what the expectations are. We certainly want to provide clarity as to our expectations. That is why we're jointly working on this rule, which we expect to have out this year. But even given the current rules, I mean, industry can operate there. As 2012 is the case in point. We can operate under the existing rules. The new rules will just codify a lot of what has been agreed to. already, for those companies that have operated up there.
And I guess I would add to that answer that when you talk about it as a next boom, the connotation to me of a boom is something that happens overnight very quickly and is sort of springs upon the world. You're not going to see things move that quickly in the Arctic offshore. It's a very remote area. The capital needed to invest there is immense. New technologies might need to be developed. When you're operating in the offshore environment, you just don't have something build up overnight. It takes a lot of time, a lot of planning to make those sorts of activities work. And so I think as folks do pursue activities up there, there's going to be a lot of time to work through issues, try and find solutions, and determine what things should be allowed under what conditions and what may be off limits.
Charlie, agree, disagree? What are your thoughts on?
No, I do agree with that, and certainly. I mean, you look at deep water itself. The deep water boom. It's actually occurred over a long time as well. Actually, depending on what it's not like the current shale things. It takes time because of the technology, but. The technology, if you look at the track record of the technology and the progress, we've gone in the Gulf of Mexico just in my lifetime from 10 feet of water to 10,000 feet of water. And although my lifetime's been pretty long now, but the technology has actually delivered and done well. And so what we have to, the other part we have to work on, which is what Center for Offshore Safety is working on, is we have to make sure that technology gets delivered. If you look at the major incidents, major incidents are generally not about the technology. They're about the way somebody interacted with the technology and the way they made decisions and the way they made plans and the way they maintained barriers. And so in all of these places that, like ultra deep water and the Arctic, where we're extremely concerned, and that's one of the beauties of SIMS, the SIMS regulation, and of the Center for Offshore Safety, is because it focuses on that. It focuses on safety culture and leadership and building these effective systems that are continuously measured. So it's not just about the technology, it's about delivering the technology, but then measuring how the systems deliver it over time. And so I think people should have a lot more confidence in it because of that. And also, it allows for a lot more sharing. Even though companies had lots of these systems in place, we're focusing on sharing good practices and developing good practices in the industry to share to help make these systems more robust.
Is there a specific example that any of you could provide where the level of cooperation between the government and industry was excellent and that you look to as an example for how to move forward in future incidents or when there's another occurrence?
Well, I would offer maybe a couple of examples. One is the buildup of pollution response capability. I think is a success story. There are capabilities that are in place now in the Gulf of Mexico to respond to a Deepwater Horizon type event that were not readily available, for that event. They are now there. There's requirements that are in place for anyone operating in the deep water to have a contractual relationship with those providers, and that was there was a lot of dialogue between industry and government to help create the conditions for that and to put it into place. So I think that's a success story. I think what Charlie mentioned regarding SEMS is another area of very robust interaction, and it may sound sort of abstract, but the human element part of managing safety offshore is absolutely critical. So I think Charlie and I agree on that. We have had a number of dialogues on this, a lot of interaction on that, and that is a basis for ongoing discussion between government and industry, and I think an area that we can continue to refine.
I agree. One of the big, the other big things that I mentioned that people are starting to change their thinking about is, for instance, training. So there's been an extensive amount of training in this industry, but you need the training, but you need more than training. You need to have the skills and knowledge to make good decisions, to face new situations and new scenarios, and respond to those correctly. So I mean, one of the difficulties in the past is there was a lot of thinking around the checklist. So if we go check this off, and then we're okay now because we've done the checklist. But of course the situation is the next problem is quite likely to be different than the past problem. So people, so you have to have systems that think about how they're going to respond, and actually have it safely, and actually have experiences. They have to have practiced how they're going to respond to all these different possible scenarios. So there's a lot of, I think the whole idea of performance-based safety and performance-based regulation is really a powerful process. And I think that's a lot of what the Presidential Commission said, that we needed a wholesale change in safety culture in the industry. And I think if you look back at one of the things they meant, it was really getting this balance between focusing on protecting individuals, which is important and we don't want to lose sight of. We don't want people to mash their fingers or break their arms, but we also don't, we want to be robust in responding to these complex situations of many systems working together and people making decisions, which is what really leads to the major incident. So we have to have a real balance between managing both of those. And I think SIMS and Center for Offshore Safety, that's one of the, I think, big success stories of collaborating to do that and getting this balance and then delivering this safety culture, this change in the safety culture that we've talked about.
And I would add one other area where I think collaboration has been strong, not just with industry, but with a lot of other stakeholder groups in academia, and that's in the realm of science. That there's a lot of information gaps, there's a lot of issues that people recognize that need more information, and there's a lot of folks working on those questions, and we spend a lot of time getting those people together, having workshops, sharing findings, sharing research to make sure that good science is being developed and being made available to folks who need that science to make decisions.
All right. So I'll share a question from the audience, and I'm not going to paraphrase. I'll do word for word, so hopefully I did read it over. So this is a question for Charlie. One of the main recommendations of the BP Oil Spill Commission is to make the Center for Offshore Safety independent from the oil and gas industry. Is there any intention to move your office to be outside of the American Petroleum Institute?
Well, I guess the first thing, the recommendation was really to have a for the industry, by the industry organization. So, we are, a for the industry, by the industry organization. There was a lot of discussion about, who we would be associated with, and we are associated, we are part of the American Petroleum Institute. The reason, for that was because, so what we're focused on are these safety management systems, and we're also measuring the safety management systems. And one of the things that you find in the process of doing that is opportunities to change standards. And who does the standards? The industry collaborates through API to develop the industry standards. And so we can immediately feed that back into this process of enhancing, improving, and changing standards. So it's actually we viewed it as a good way to facilitate what we wanted to do. So that's why we've been that way. So the short answer to the question is there isn't a plan right now. But that's why we were associated, was because it feeds directly into what we learn can feed directly into improving and enhancing industry standards, because the API is the group that does that through industry collaboration. Again, it's not API. It facilitates the fact that the industry works together and develops these standards together.
In terms of science sharing, where do the biggest gaps exist on sharing data and information for all the panelists?
I don't think I would characterize the gaps being in sharing. I think that there's a lot of mechanisms to share science, and certainly no one's shy about telling us what they think the right science is for us to consider. But there are gaps in information, and they vary. For instance, until we started working renewable energy and the sand program for coastal restoration, we really hadn't been active in the Atlantic for quite a long time. So there was a big lack of baseline information on what habitats were out there, what the migration routes were for certain endangered species, where their feeding areas were. So a lot of work to sort of fill in the information gaps you need for basic information to help your decision making. I think that as we move into any new area, whether it's Atlantic for renewable energy or new areas in the Arctic, there's a lot of baseline information you really need to collect up front, and getting people together to identify those most critical information gaps is a key thing of what we try and do in our studies program, so we can focus our dollars to get that information. And then I think another area where we're trying to improve the sort of science we do is to improve the monitoring programs in areas where there are activities, so that we get a better sense of how these activities affect the environment, how the mitigation measures are working, so that we can build that into an adaptive management approach to adjust how we do our business over time.
I'll bring up oil spill research again as far as an area that is worthy of more scientific attention. And I'm happy to say it's been receiving a lot more attention and funding, particularly in the last 4 years. One of the criticisms that was leveled against the government and the industry during the Gulf oil spill was that oil spill technology had not improved measurably since the Exxon Valdez, and that was a valid criticism. Since then, a lot has changed. I mentioned earlier about the subsea capabilities, but even the ability to improve surface response capability, surveillance, sensor capability, so that the tools that are available can be put to more effective use. There have been great strides there, and still more to be done. But that's actually an area of very concentrated focus for my bureau, as well as a number of other federal agencies, and in many cases in conjunction with the industry.
And just adding on there, I think that there's BOEM's doing a lot of science, and other groups and agencies are also doing a lot of studies in the Atlantic to get the baseline information on a whole host of different activities. And so one of the things that I think that when the burden on the applicants for the level of science is very high, so we complete these studies on from everything avian and bat to geophysical, geotechnical, marine archaeology, marine mammals. We study the whole spectrum of potential issues, and then when we complete those studies, we provide them to the agency, so then they become part of that baseline data that's available. Speaking specific to some of the earlier, or the projects that will be online earliest in the offshore renewable realm, Block Island, we're doing a number of pre, during, and post-construction surveys, so that we'll have a better idea of what the impacts are, from impact pile driving to lobsters and fish and marine mammals, and how does the benthic habitat, the harder bottom habitat, recover? How long does it take? So we'll we consider Block Island to be a development, a smaller scale project that will give us an idea of what impacts from a larger project could be. So it really does feed into the decision-making process that we will all undertake for the future larger scale offshore projects. So as we're collecting this information, it's good science, and it all gets fed into the government, their different repositories, and then we're required as applicants to process it and do during and post-construction studies as well. So each year we'll know more.
Well, I wanted to mention, one more. So, obviously, like I talked about earlier, on building things, on equipment, you really want to focus on how you can make these new technologies, new equipment, manage and reduce risk. But I think there's another thing that we're, that the industry's starting to focus on now, and I think all of us, have an opportunity to think about around science, and that, is around decision making and human interaction. And when I give these talks, a lot of people And I'm an engineer, and a lot of times the engineers think that maybe this is a little too esoteric, but I think technology can drive that, and things like decision support tools, where you build tools that extract information and pre-analyze information, that collect more information than we were collecting before, that help people recognize situations and make better decisions. That there's a lot of technology and science that can go into that, and then simply, how teams interact, and and how decisions get made, and a lot of that, it's like the cockpit culture thing that the FAA's worked on, and you can actually attack that with science too, on certain kinds of simulators, certain kind of simulations, certain kinds of scenarios, and so I think that we are focusing on. We need to think of that also, that part of science that delivers safety in addition to just the equipment.
All right, we'll bring in another audience question to Dr. Cruickshank. Have the oil companies proven themselves environmentally responsible in the Arctic?
Well, that's an interesting question, in that there's not been a lot of activity there for which someone might want to build a large body of knowledge. But I think that the main point here is that everybody would have the same goal around activities, and that is to make sure that whatever activities occur do not damage the environment. That is a shared goal of government, of industry, of any stakeholder group. And I think that there's a lot of effort by all those parties to make sure that if activities occur, they're done in a way that does protect the environment. And there may be some differences of opinion along the way about what those measures might need to be to achieve that protection, but the goal is shared, the intent is there, and I think that to date that when people have been doing activities in the Arctic, they have done everything that we have asked them to do, and sometimes more, in order to try and limit what impact they may have.
Charlie, do you think the industry has sufficiently demonstrated its safety record and its care for the environment in the Arctic?
I do. I think there and other places, if you look at the data around hydrocarbon releases, and there's huge intensity on that, and I think the record is good. The situation is and I was going to talk about that earlier, and about how do you convince people that technology and challenges are in their best interest. Certainly the best way to do that is to have a good performance record, but the problem is you can have an extremely good performance record and an extremely broad performance record, but then when an incident occurs, it just immediately negates all of that progress you'd made on convincing people that you're really dedicated to this. And so that's where we're struggling back from now, is to say that yes, we do want to learn from all these. Yes, we do want to do better. Yes, we are doing better, and we're really focused on that. It's not that these things didn't that we're really wanting to learn and do that. But I think that certainly demonstrating that's good, and now demonstrating that we want to learn and do better is good, and that's what we're trying to do.
So where is there more resistance, from the public or from regulators?
From the public.
How do you overcome that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think you certainly, and it's same with wind. It's actually the same with wind and all these other areas of energy. In fact, even other kinds of businesses. But you have to communicate with the public, communicate with the stakeholders, and really show them what we're doing. It's difficult because a lot, especially when you start getting into Arctic and deep water, the concepts and the technology are really challenging. It's hard to boil that down to sound bites, but you just have to communicate. And in fact, just the act of communication shows that you're really dedicated to doing this in a way that really manages the risk. And I think like I talked about earlier, I think the fact that we're saying now that we really want to put a focus not only on building things that are good, but we want to put a focus on SIMS, which is, you know, operating well every day, having operational excellence every day, you know, should, I hope, change the thinking about the stakeholders. Is, you know, we're not only going to build something that's sound, we're also going to operate it every day, you know, in a sound and safe way.
Aileen, US EPA recently announced proposed regulations for existing power plants, and the thinking is that this will usher in more renewable energy in the United States if the rule does become final. What role do you see offshore wind playing as states put together their compliance mechanisms in meeting those standards?
Well, we'd like to play a huge role. You know, we are well situated. The wind blows the hardest offshore in the northeast of the country, which is an area where there's a large demand, and it's a consistent baseload power source that states can rely on. So, you know, we're really excited about that. I'm excited about it professionally and personally. I think it's a great step in the right direction. And I think that our industry is ready to be that next phase of responsible energy. And with BOEM doing more leases, there'll be more opportunities. The key aspect of it is that we need not just the BOEM lease, we also need a place to sell the power. So we need to have, some states are looking into renewable energy credits. New Jersey has a program called the Ocean Renewable Energy Credit, or the OREC. Other states or other regions rely on the utilities to enter into power purchase agreements, but there's really two components for us to have a successful project. First is the BOEM lease, and second is the power sales agreement. So we hope that as more states put together their compliance plan, they'll also put together some mandatory measures for their utilities to support that compliance, or maybe the states will actually come up with funding mechanisms like New Jersey's concept with the Ocean Renewable Energy Credits.
Dr. Cruickshank, is there pressure on your office at all to move forward with offshore renewable energy development in order to specifically meet these standards when they come online?
I don't know that pressure is the right term. I think it's a clearly stated goal of this administration to move forward with renewable energy as part of the climate action plan, and we see offshore wind and other offshore energy as having the potential to contribute to those goals. And so we are moving forward. You know, I don't think that the folks in the industry would necessarily say we've been moving too fast in making leases available, but we've been working hard with all the stakeholders to try and make sure that the areas we do make available are ones that have a good chance of success, which is I think really important for getting the industry off the ground, is making sure that these first opportunities do are ones that have the best chance of actually getting something built and operating, so that we can show that this industry can work.
So in terms of focus within your office, is there more of a focus on the renewable side or oil and gas?
I guess I'd say one of the benefits of being a small bureau is that we have a narrow focus to begin with. And so it's not one over the other. We are focusing on oil and gas, we're focusing on renewables, we're focusing on the sand program. And there's no need to put one above the other. We know they're all important, and since that pretty much covers our entire portfolio, we can focus on all of them at once.
So another question from the audience, I imagine this is for the entire panel. Should the private sector, energy companies, be paying for the science and research needed to assess and minimize their environmental impact? Right now, the taxpayers pay for this. Then they buy energy, then the companies make profits.
I'll start, and I think it's the premise is only partially true in that question. That yes, the government is funding a lot of science, but industry is funding as well. And I think that part of the reason we're set up as we are is for instance, on the oil and gas side, the key decisions are made long before you know what members of industry may be acquiring leases or doing activities in a particular site. We need to build our science and do our environmental and other analyses well in advance of making anything available to the private sector. So you're really not in a position to charge the private sector for that work in any direct manner. I think, as Aileen mentioned earlier, on renewable energy, where there's a lot of, the same dynamic works for some of those decisions, but in other cases, a lot of the decisions are going to come on the specific projects post-leasing, and so in that case, you really do have the lessees doing a lot of the science that will be important for the specific projects. As a practical matter, I think that science is coming from a lot of different directions. We shouldn't be trying to limit where that science is coming from. We think everybody should be contributing to build that information base. And I guess just sort of the last point I would note is that to some extent, industry does pay for the science we do, in the sense that a portion of our budget is being funded from the receipts from leases, and so some of that money is being turned around into the reinvestment in the program to develop that information.
And I'd say, two things about that. So certainly, I do think there's a significant amount of industry investment in this, but the key thing, I mean, most of the concerns people really have are about integrity and containing the problem. I mean, obviously there's environmental, damage and risk are going to be greatly minimalized if you don't have the problem. So if you count the fact that there's a huge investment in delivering equipment and systems and that reduce risk and are more reliable and deliver long-term integrity, that's a huge investment in protecting the environment right there. Is not having a problem. And there's a huge investment in not having a problem. And then the other thing I mentioned, the director mentions OESI. One of the things we did do out of the federal FOC on this was set up a group, and one of the key parts of the group was a place where we could have a dialogue, the government, the industry, and other stakeholders, and see if, in fact, one of the things was to see if there were places that we needed to do, more science. And so that was one of the purposes for having that and having the dialogue, is to see, are there places where we've missed, funding areas of science that we should be.
And one of the, just touching on a little bit about what Dr. Cruickshank said, and BOEM does do a lot of the baseline science, and the applicant or the leaseholder is responsible for doing a lot of the detailed scientific assessment that's required for BOEM to complete their NEPA assessment. But one of the things that I think is so valuable is the marine spatial planning efforts, and those happen, or they're thought of, and ideally they happen well before BOEM has identified their wind energy areas. And so that science is coming from a lot of foundations like the Moore Foundation, and from grants from federal agencies and from other foundations, and that's really laying the initial framework for kind of charting out what's going on in the ocean, and giving groups the funds to come together and talk about what sort of activities that folks, what are the goals for the region, and what sort of activities would folks like to see, where would they like to see them, and that information then funnels into BOEM's decision making, and ultimately it really shortlists the location in which we have to develop our projects. So in that spectrum, the offshore wind developers really don't come into the end, and then we do the really detailed micrositing assessment. So really, it's important that the science that's going on, it's all critically important to good decision making. And I think the one thing that I would like all of us to think about is, as much as possible, from that first initial site assessment to our data collection, we should all be collecting the data in a format so that we can all work the data set together, so that we're creating data sets that can be run statistically, that there's some sort of standardization as much as possible so that we're not all working in silos. And BOEM has helped out with that by creating guidelines for development that we have to comply with. And when there's other science going on and folks ask me, how about to lay out their protocols, I always reference those guidelines. So we're getting there, but I think we can do more as a group to really take a step back and try to work together so that we're building one comprehensive data set.
Charlie, how would you rate the Obama administration's handling of oil and gas development, of moving forward?
Well,
they can close their ears while you answer.
I guess what I'd say is actually, so I've been, I've been really focused on, what we've learned since the incident, on SIMS and SIMS effectiveness, and really on the science and technology around safety that has to be done. And certainly, my interaction with Bessie and BOEM has really been, great on this, this mutual interest on delivering this safety, on delivering, SIMS that has enhanced safety and safety culture and performance-based regulation. And so I'd say all those experiences I've had about what I'm working on and who I've been working with, have been good on enhancing and delivering and improving safety.
So the criticism that the administration receives for not moving aggressively enough, that's not something that you necessarily are witness to?
Yeah, well, I haven't had any, and like I said, I haven't any experience with that. I've really been focused on how we're going to make SIMS as effective as possible and measure it, to deliver better effectiveness. And that interaction has been great.
So another question from the audience. Some well casings last longer than others, and yet all well casings will eventually fail. How long are offshore oil well casings designed to last?
That should probably be me. I think the premise is correct. I don't have a definitive answer to that. It is something that does concern us. We look, obviously, as part of the whole decommissioning process for offshore facilities, the proper plugging and abandonment of these facilities and at the long-term environmental risk that they may pose. To date, we have not had a problem, with any wells that have been plugged and abandoned properly and have been verified as such. But yes, that is a absolute consideration, and when we consider a site, return to its original state.
Charlie, do you want to?
Well, I just wanted to add on. Certainly, when wells are designed, that the life of the well is a key consideration in the design, and it's a consideration in the kind of casing that's used and the thickness of the casing that's used, and and there's monitoring programs. Sometimes for the casing, always for the production tubing, which is part of the system to look at if there's corrosion issues and things that need to be mitigated. And the other thing that is there's multiple layers of casing, so it's not a casing. There's multiple layers of casing, and generally between the casing is cement. So there's a whole system of delivering integrity. And just like the director said, so I think that it's really it's hard to say there's a short answer to the question, because the wells are designed to last as long as they need to, with quite some safety margin, because some of them operate effectively beyond their original design life. But if they do, then those have inspection programs and integrity programs to make sure they're still okay. But when you go back and plug and abandon them, you plug in you actually put cement plugs and barriers deep in the well so that the hydrocarbon zones are no longer communicated to the surface. So they aren't communicated. Properly abandoned wells, that doesn't communicate back up to the surface.
So a question for all the panelists. What are the economic opportunities that exist for the U.S. in developing its offshore energy resources, and do those economic opportunities outweigh any of the potential risks?
Well, I think in terms of the economic opportunities, that's sort of inherent in the energy business itself. That energy is a key part of our economy, and whether or not the particular projects we're looking at are commercial now or will be at some point in the future, it's the economic factors that are driving the demand for energy and folks' interest in looking at these potential energy projects. In terms of outweighing the risk, well, that really gets to the fundamental point of BOEM's mission, which is to balance, try to find that appropriate balance between allowing development of a resource and protecting the environment. And there is no generic answer to that question. It's really built into every decision, and what we do on a particular decision gives you the answer of what we think that balance is in that particular context.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm probably not the right person to ask about the economics of it. I know that as we go into ultra deep water, the costs of the projects go up. The potential payoffs are something that many of the individual companies make that determination. From a risk perspective, I think we all accept the fact that activity of that nature is not risk-free, but it's our responsibility to work with the companies to reduce that risk to the lowest practical level. That is a very, very focused concern of ours. And to get to the point Charlie made earlier about the complexity of many of the systems that's necessary to reach these frontier areas, we are looking to work very closely with the industry and with other elements of government to really understand the kinds of risks that we base within that complexity. For example, we're seeking to help establish a near-miss reporting system that will help understand when barriers are broken and get a better understanding of why they failed and which ones worked, so that we can again reduce overall risk to the lowest level possible. That information is meant to be shared broadly across the industry. I know many companies are already doing that, and many people have told me that they learn more from the near miss than they do from actual incidents. It's just more revealing in terms of what they need to do to improve the level of safety and reduce risk to the lowest level possible. So that's our focus, is keeping the risk as low as possible.
And so, so Center for Offshore Safety has a safety performance indicator reporting system that we have up and running now, and a learning from incidents reporting system that also includes near misses that are high value learning opportunities. So we're really focused on how you learn and how you manage and how you continue to reduce risk. But I mean, of course, the easy answer to the question is we darn sure better get it right, because all of the prosperity in the U.S. is based on energy, and a lot of people think about oil and gas companies as somehow not being interested in renewables and other kinds of energy. But if you hear the dialogue and you look at the studies, I mean, we're going to need all of everything, and oil and gas companies, even ones that don't focus on that part of the business, say yes, we need all of everything, but we've got to have this hydrocarbon bridge till we get there, and so. Absolutely, the prosperity, and you look at the direct jobs and indirect jobs and economic impact and anything you can study. It has to be done, but it can't be done unless we do it right and meet the expectations of the American people, who are the customers of government and the industry. So, we're intensely focused on that, and there's an unbelievable amount of importance and economic value for involved in it.
Specific to offshore wind, there's no price for the fuel. The wind is free, so we're not subject to any sort of commodity pricing. So there's a real stable pricing that really helps in the power the power forecasting, and there's an economic benefit there. And that's about all I know about the power forecasting side of the business. But what I do think that another especially strong area where offshore wind can provide an economic impact is in the economic development, reinvigorating some of our ports. We'll need to build a supply chain, and we have ports up and down the East Coast and on the West Coast that could really use some industry. So, for example, New Bedford, Mass. is currently building a renewable energy commerce terminal, and they're really they're building it proactively to support the offshore renewable energy industry. And they have a lot of forecasting about the number of jobs that it will bring to that community. Quonset Point in Rhode Island, and also ports in New Jersey and New York and further down the coast. There's a real big economic development, jobs and just port reinvigoration that comes with the industry, and building that new supply chain that is a real positive, in addition to the environmental benefits that this type of industry will bring.
All right, so another audience question, and we have about 10 minutes left, so if there are any questions from the audience that you want to get in before we wrap up, please do so now. So for Dr. Cruickshank, how is BOEM working with NOAA and USCG to ensure that marine transportation and commerce is not cut off, given the current proposed positioning of BOEM lease blocks for wind energy projects?
We've been doing a lot of work with the Coast Guard. There's reference made earlier by Eileen to the intergovernmental task forces we set up, which included federal agencies as well as state, local, and tribal governments. Coast Guard is a member of every one of those task forces, and so we hear their concerns right off the bat. We avoid the traffic separation schemes immediately along with the buffer zone around that, and the issue comes not so much in those defined traffic lanes, but the fact that, if you will, a lot of vessel traffic is off-road in a sense, that they go where they have traditionally gone, and there's never been a need really before this program for Coast Guard or anybody else to dig into that data to see what it was telling you. So a lot of what we've done with the Coast Guard and with NOAA is do an analysis of all that vessel traffic to understand what sorts of vessels are going where and when and how often. And we've also been working with the Coast Guard and one of the national laboratories to try and develop a model that will tell you how some of that traffic will react when something's put in front of them, like a wind farm. And when they do that reaction, what does that mean for navigation risks? Because maybe they're moving closer to certain other types of marine vessels out there. So there's an awful lot of work being done, and that will continue to occur even though we've established some wind energy areas and issued some leases. There's more analysis to come when an actual project is designed and proposed for construction, where there will be a lot more work around what sort of mitigation measures may need to be built in to protect navigation safety.
Aileen, do you want to weigh in on this? Is this an issue that you
Yeah, this is something that we
constantly
deal
deal with?
with all the time, and really trying to address whether it be radar or vessel traffic areas. And I think there's a misconception out there that when BOEM puts out a wind energy area that we're just going to stack it full of wind turbines, and that it's just not reality. There's not power purchase agreements available for that, and certainly we don't think it would be responsible development either. So within those wind energy areas, there is area to do different things to accommodate different stakeholders. I think conceptually people have mentioned things to us like vessel transit routes, creating a 2-mile area within a wind energy area. If that's appropriate, that's something that we would discuss for that wind energy area. There's also folks have brought up issues of radar and radar clutter, and they've suggested to us that we could put there's different types of equipment, radar repeaters. Those are all things that we have to work out as the leaseholder, and work together with the different stakeholders to figure out how they can operate safely within the wind energy area. And we work closely with BOEM on that, but we really have to also take the initiative to understand what the issues are. And it's our goal to always propose a solution to BOEM as opposed to proposing a problem, because we like to move fast, and posing problems is never a fast way to go. So, we are listening to that sort of those concerns, and for our Block Island project, we are doing a radar study. The Coast Guard is requiring it, so we'll get some more information about how the turbines will react with radar. And again, it's a learning process for us and for the agencies.
So we have time for just one more question, and I'll ask it from the audience. What's the level of engagement with NOAA's oil spill experts to plan, prepare, and respond to offshore drilling issues?
I'll take that. Quite a bit. We have regular dialogue with NOAA. We engage in quite a few R&D projects jointly with NOAA. We're engaged with them in using a lot of their capabilities, such as IRMA, which is an automated mapping system, a GIS type system. It was used in the Gulf oil spill, but that's been broadened to other areas of the country, and we've actually, Bessie has actually helped fund development of that for the Arctic. So quite a bit of interaction with NOAA, as well as with other federal agencies that comprise the National Response Team. There's 16 federal agencies that participate on that, all geared around effective federal response in the event of a major oil spill. So.
16 federal agencies. Are there too many people at the table?
Well, not everybody has interest in every issue, so no. When you need capability, for example, DoD is at the table. Sometimes in a large oil spill, you may need DoD capabilities, and the NRT member is the reach back to obtain that capability. So Department of Energy and so forth. So people who don't necessarily deal with oil spills on a day-to-day basis have a role in a national level response, so that's why they're there. The core group, NOAA, EPA, Coast Guard, Bessie, BOEM, we're very active participants in that.
All right, wonderful. Thank you to the panelists for a wonderful discussion.
And I want to, in turn, thank Monica for leading a wonderful and interesting discussion on some of the most challenging issues facing the government and in our offshore waters. So that's a wrap for today, day 2 of Capitol Hill Ocean Week. I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow, 8:30 for registration and coffee and tea, and 9 o'clock for our first session. And a last thank you to all of our sponsors and partners and all of the staff and volunteers who make the conference really so seamless for all of us. So thank you. Have a good afternoon.